Thank you, Deep Brave Clywyd, and thank you, Minister, for your statement today. And I would like to start by providing a few comments about the first wave of milestones in the hope of focusing on the rationale behind them and in the hope of discovering why the Minister considers these milestones ambitious, given the 30-year timescale. Firstly, Minister, with regards to gender pay gap you're aiming to eliminate by 2050, the data which is frequently used, and it has even been used in the Wellbeing Wales Report 2021, is a measurement based on median full-time hourly earnings. And this simple measurement collates the salaries of men and women and divides them by 37 to give an hourly rate. It then adds hourly pay data, which is only available for a small number of businesses. And by including this data, you then arrive at the median or middle value of the data set. But the problem with using this data is that it doesn't reflect the complexity of pay relationships across the employed sector of society. For instance, it does not take into consideration experience, levels of qualification, additional benefit entitlements, pension relationships, and it does not take into consideration the profitability of businesses or even industry standards when comparing pay between company executives. Furthermore, it doesn't consider gender behavior. For example, are men more likely to travel further distances than women to access work and therefore able to access higher paying roles? What about geographical variance? Do those living on the border between England and Wales travel into England for work and therefore access higher average salaries? Are women more likely to change jobs than men and as a result experience more entry-level salaries? The list can go on, but what we do know is that women are more likely to work fewer hours to support families, and that by taking time out to have children substantially increases the gender gaps. But what consideration is given as to whether or not this is reflected by men in the family, such as working longer hours or by changing jobs for higher salaries to support their families? Ultimately, we need to know how this is taken into consideration. And the problem with using this milestone based upon such crude data is that the government and the Future Generations Commissioner is conditioning society, particularly women in society, to think that they are inherently underpaid to do the same job as men. Yet you have no substantive evidence that understands the complexity of gender pay, from what I can see, to actually back that up. I'm concerned in your continued promotion of the gender pay gap without the necessary data to support it. You're actually causing more harm than good by creating a division that isn't there. From your very crude analysis, you have reported that women are paid 1.5% more on average than men for part-time work, which indicates that there isn't an institutional underpayment of women in the workplace. But as previously highlighted, there are far more complex factors at play which need to be understood. Thus, given the continued variance in the data, you may already be hitting your milestone targets, but until you can accurately measure gender pay differences that reflect the complexity of gender in the workplace, you'll never know, which ultimately means that including this milestone is pointless. In my mind, a more meaningful milestone target would be just to have an employment rate of 60% for disabled people. Now, that would be an ambitious milestone. For the avoidance of doubt, I want to point out, and I do want it on the record, that I believe passionately that everyone should have equal pay for equal work, regardless of gender, sex, race, disability, or religion. And I make these comments because I unfortunately see the potential for this government to start designing future legislation to meet its targets that it hasn't properly understood. Secondly, to expand on this argument, I want to very briefly touch upon a point mentioned in the Wellbeing Wales Report 2021 under the gender section concerning education. It's reported that from foundation phase to key stage 3, a high proportion of girls and boys achieve the expected outcomes. Girls also continue to achieve better educational outcomes at GCSE, and a higher proportion of them aged 16 to 18 remain in full-time education when compared to boys. This is also the case for those aged 18 to 24. What concerns me, and I suspect concerns a great many others, is whether or not improving girls' education is coming at the expense of boys' education. In reality, if there was a gender balance, you should always get a slightly higher proportion of girls or boys attaining higher grades in any given year, or over a set period, this would average out. However, the fact that you're reporting this trend means that teaching methods seem to have potentially changed to favour girls against boys, and I personally would be interested in seeing an elimination of this educational attainment gap in the second wave of your Future Generations milestones. Third and finally, I think it's very worthwhile target to aim to reduce the number of 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in employment, education, or training. And I believe empowering young people with a work ethic is essential in helping them to maximize their potential. As we know, studies have shown that time spent as a NEET can have a detrimental effect on physical and mental health, and it increases the likelihood of unemployment, low wages, or low quality work later on in life. But the target we have set for 2050 is to reduce the number of NEETs to only 10% for 16 to 24-year-olds. And given that this is a 30-year target, this is pretty unambitious, especially given that the current number of NEETs in England is already 10.6%. Minister, having a target of 10% is not really a milestone, is it? It is fairly meaningless given that the current situation in Wales as of 2020 is that 13.9% of people aged 16 to 24.
You need to conclude now.
Were NEETs, and again, given the sampling data does not accurately consider the complexity of the data, such as the relative mobility of young people, those attending further education or colleges or independent schools, the percentage of 16 to 24-year-olds who are in NEET in reality could already be much lower, and in theory it could already be met. It implies that the government is bereft of ideas, sets targets that it predicts it can easily meet, so it can't be criticised for failing, and is ultimately only paying lip service to improving the lives of individuals across the country. Thank you, Deep Roy Clywyd, and with that in mind, I would also like to take the opportunity to wish the Minister a very happy birthday, as I believe it's tomorrow. Thank you.